In this chapter, we're going to discuss how to classify the various time signatures that you're going to encounter in this course. You're going to learn about the classifications of musical time, classifying time signatures by the type of subdivision, and you're also going to learn about simple time signatures, compound time signatures, and complex, which are sometimes called irregular time signatures. Complex and irregular are two words for the same thing. And we're also going to talk a little bit about some problems with time signatures. When classifying a time signature, we can break it down into three basic categories. You have simple time, compound time, complex or irregular time. Each one of these categories will classify the time signature based on how the subdivision is broken up in the time signature. In general, a time signature provides specific information that informs a musician on how many beats there are in a measure and the note value that is worth one beat. If you have a simple time signature, then what happens is the subdivision of the beat is divided into two equal parts. So for example, if the division of the beat is a quarter note, then the subdivision of the beat would be 2/8 notes in simple time. Since there are 2/8 notes for every quarter note, we're generally going to refer to that type of time signature as simple time. Some examples of simple time are 2/4, 3/4, and 4/2. In 2/4, you've got two quarter notes in the measure. Each one of those quarter notes can be broken down into 2/8 notes. In 3/4 time, you have three quarter notes in the measure, and each one of those quarter notes can be broken down into 2/8 notes as well. In 4/2 time, because the bottom number is a 2, you have 4 half notes in the measure, and each half note can be broken down into 2 quarter notes. So I'm saying broken down, but really the correct term is subdivided. So in 2/4, you subdivide quarter notes into 8 notes. In 3/4, you subdivide the quarter notes into 8 notes as well. And in 4/2, you subdivide the half notes into quarter notes. Some time signatures are considered compound because the beat can be divided into 3 equal parts. So in this example, 6/8 would be considered compound time because even though the 8th note seems to be the beat in 6/8 time, we usually count it in groups of 2. So it sounds like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, with beat 1 and 4 acting as the main pulse for the piece. In a 9/8 time signature, you have 3 sets of 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In 6/4, you also have two groups of 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So because in 6/8 time, the dotted quarter note is actually serving as the beat, that dotted quarter note then gets subdivided into 3 equal parts, 3/8 notes. In 9/8 time, it's the same thing. You have 3 dotted quarter notes in a measure, which are divided down into 3/8 notes. In 6/4 time, you have 6 quarter notes, which the beat in a 6/4 time may be considered a dotted half note. So those dotted half notes are broken down into 3 beats each. So essentially, simple time is when the subdivision gets broken down into 2 beats, 2 subdivisions, and compound time is when the subdivision gets broken down into sets of 3. Complex or regular time is essentially anything that isn't simple or compound time. So just remember, complex, irregular, those are 2 terms that mean the same thing. You can use either one. And there's an easier way to identify simple, compound, and complex time signatures, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So let's break this down a little bit further. Time signatures provide specific information that informs the musician how many beats are in a measure and the note value that is worth one beat. We already know this. But time signatures can also be in duple, triple, or quadruple time. This refers to the number of beats in the measure. So if a time signature has a 2 on top, it's duple. If it has a 3 on top, it's triple. If it has a 4 on top, it's quadruple. Of course, this isn't always accurate because sometimes you're going to have a 6/8 time signature. With 6/8 time signatures and odd compound time signatures like that, we still break it down into duple or triple or quadruple. An example of a compound time signature that uses duple meter would be 6/8 time, because you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the dotted quarter notes are the beat. A triple would be 9/8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Basically, you have 3 sets of quarter notes, dotted quarter notes. Quadruple time might be 12/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 4 groups of dotted quarter notes. So let's talk a little bit more about simple time signatures. When a piece of music is written in simple time, the main beat can be subdivided into 2 smaller and equal beats. Typically, the subdivided notes are 8th notes and are connected with a beam over the top of the notes, such as what you see in the image on the top. Remember, there are some simple time signatures where the 8th note or some other note value functions as the main beat for the music. So an example of that would be if you have a time signature like 4/2. The half note is a beat, which means the subdivision is a quarter note. If you have 4/16, the 16th note would be the beat, and so the 32nd note would be the subdivision. So, as you learned from the previous slide, we can group time signatures into 2, 3, or 4 beats. If the time signature doesn't have a 2, 3, or a 4 as a top beat, it's not simple time. So in 2/4 time, there are 2 beats per measure, and the beat is a quarter note. The subdivision in 2/4 time is going to be 2 8th notes per beat. In 3/4 time, there are 3 beats per measure. The beat is a quarter note. So the subdivision is 2 8th notes per beat. So we'd call that simple triple time. In 4/4 time, because there's 4 beats per measure, we would call that simple quadruple. In 3/8 time, there are 3 beats per measure. The beat is the 8th note. The subdivision is 2 16th notes per beat. So we would call that simple triple because of the top number. In 2/2 time, you have 2 beats per measure. The beat is a half note, and the subdivision is 2 quarter notes per beat. So we call that simple duple because the top number is a 2. The next one would be simple triple. 3/16 is going to be simple triple because the beat is a 16th note, and the subdivision is 2 32nd notes per beat. In 4/8 time, you have 4 beats per measure. The beat is the 8th note, and the subdivision is 2 16th notes per beat. So we would call that quadruple, simple quadruple. Okay, so let's test you a little bit on a few of these time signatures. So what type of time signature is 2/4? Remember, look at the top number. If it's a 2, 3, or 4, then we know it's going to be a simple time signature. All simple time signatures will have a 2, a 3, or a 4 as a top number. So knowing that, you have to come up with 2 answers for this. First, you have to talk about the type of time signature, and second, you have to identify the number of beats using duple, triple, or quadruple. So I'm going to give you the answer now. If you need to pause it, go ahead and pause it and try and figure this out. 2/4 is a simple duple time signature. It's simple because the beat is divided into 2 equal parts with 8th notes. It's duple because there are 2 beats per measure. So simple duple. What type of time signature is 4/4? I'll give you a second to think about this. Pause the video if you need to. If you said simple quadruple, you are correct. It's simple quadruple because the beat can be broken down into two smaller beats, the eighth notes. The quarter note gets broken down into two eighth notes. And it's quadruple because there's 4 beats in the measure. What about 3/16? I'll give you a moment. If you said simple triple, you are correct. It's simple triple because there are 3 beats per measure, so that's where you get the triple from. And the 16th note can be broken down into 2 smaller 32nd notes. Unlike simple time signatures, the beat in a compound time signature is subdivided into 3 equally spaced notes. Compound time signatures are more advanced time signatures and typically only taught after musicians have mastered simple time signatures. However, if you look at that image up in the right corner, you'll see 3 eighth notes that are attached by a single beam. So what this is showing is that those 3 eighth notes are most likely occurring over the course of one beat. So a simple way to figure out if you have a compound time signature is to divide the top number by 3. If the top number can be divided by 3, it's compound. Now the only exception is time signatures that have a 3 as the top number. And this can be a bit confusing, but if there's a 3 as a top number, then it's a simple time signature. There's an even easier way to figure out simple and compound time signatures, but we'll get to that in just a moment. So there are 2 parts to a compound time signature. The time signature type, which is considered compound, and the number of beats in the measure. In a compound quadruple time signature, you'll have 4 beats in the measure. In a compound quadruple time signature, as I said, there are 4 beats in the measure, and the compound clarifier indicates that the subdivision of the beat is broken down into 3 smaller equal beats. So look at 12/4. In the 12/4 time signature, we can divide 12 by 3, so that gives us 4 beats per measure. The beat is a dotted half note, so you can subdivide that dotted half note into 3 quarter notes. So you essentially have 3 quarter notes per beat. That's what makes it compound. In 9/8 time, you have 3 beats per measure, and the beat is a dotted quarter note. So you can subdivide a dotted quarter note down into 3 eighth notes per beat. In 6/4 time, you divide the 6 by 3, you get 2, which gives you 2 beats per measure. The beat is a dotted half note. Since a dotted half note contains 3 quarter notes, you have 3 quarter notes per beat. In 12/16 time, you have 4 beats per measure, and the beat is a dotted eighth note. The subdivision is 3 16th notes per beat. And finally, in 6/8 time, you have 2 beats per measure. So the beat is a dotted half note, and the subdivision is 3 eighth notes per beat. So let's test you a little bit on this. So what type of time signature is 12/4? I'm going to give you a moment to think about it. We know it's a compound time signature, but we also have to figure out how many beats are in the measure. So for compound time signatures, you have to divide the top number by 3. If you divide 12 by 3, you get 4. So that makes it a compound quadruple time signature. So here you can see an example of that. In 12/4, you have 4 sets of dotted half notes. Each of those dotted half notes can be broken down into 3 quarter notes. So that's why this is a compound quadruple time signature. So what about 9/8? Again, divide the top number by 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So we know it's a compound triple time signature. Here's an example of that. In 9/8, you've got 3 dotted quarter notes per measure. So those dotted quarter notes can be divided into 3 eighth notes. So it's compound because it's not necessarily divided the way the time signature may suggest. So instead of the eighth note being the beat in a compound time signature with an 8 as the bottom, it's actually the dotted quarter note that is the beat. And we count this in 3 instead of 9. 1, 2, 3. And then your eighth notes would be 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3. Or you could count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Either way would be correct, but if you count it, just keep in mind that beats 1, 4, 7 are going to be the accented beats in the time signature. So you'll hear that pulse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, after talking about all of that, there's a very quick classification method you can use. First, determine the division of the beat. If the top number of a time signature is a 2, 3, or 4, it's simple time. It's that simple. 2, 3, or 4, it's simple time. No exceptions to that. Unless the bottom number is something really unusual, like 4.5, which may happen, but not something you're going to see unless you're studying really advanced modern music. In compound time, if the top number of a time signature is a 6, 9, or 12, it's compound time. Very simple way to tell if it's compound time. Complex time is anything other than 2, 3, 4, 6, 9, or 12. So essentially, if it's not simple or compound, it's complex. The next thing you have to do is determine the division of the meter. If the beat is in simple time, then use the top number to determine if it's duple, triple, or quadruple. So for example, 2, 4 is simple duple because there is a 2 on top. The 2 gives you the duple classification. 3, 4 is in simple triple because there is a 3. A 3 gives you the triple classification. If the beat is in compound time, then divide the top number by 3 to determine if it's duple, triple, or quadruple. So 12, 4 is compound quadruple because 12 divided by 3 equals 4, quadruple. 9, 8 is compound triple because 9 divided by 3 equals 3, or triple. So there's a problem with 6/8 time and 9/8 time and 3/8 time, although 3/8 time is its own special category, which we'll talk about next. When you use a convention where the bottom number of a time signature indicates a note value that's worth 1 beat, the 8th note in 6/8 time should be worth 1 beat. When listening to a piece in 6/8, 9/8, or 12/8 time, the beat will often sound like it occurs on the dotted quarter note, or 2 times per measure. It almost sounds like a 2/4 time signature with triplets. You'll hear the beat 3 times in 9/8 time and 4 times in 12/8 time. The only exception to this is if the music is played very slowly. If the music is played slowly, you might hear the beat as a quarter note in 6/4 time instead of a dotted half note. But we'd still classify it as compound time because of the way the time signature is set up. So this is a problem of notation, since a note value that gets 1 beat in these compound time signatures is a dotted quarter note, when we're talking specifically about time signatures with an 8 on the bottom. However, there is no straightforward way to indicate this in a time signature. So theorists did the next best thing and used the subdivision of the beat instead to classify the number of beats. The alternative would involve using strange fractions in the time signature in an effort to represent the true beat in the time signature. And that would be really complicated. If you think about this, a 6/8 time signature may end up being notated in the following manner if the dotted quarter note, instead of the subdivision of the 8th note, was indicated on the bottom. So let's say we want to accurately notate that there are 2 beats in the measure and the dotted quarter note gets 1 beat in 6/8 time. One option could be 2 on the top and 4.5 on the bottom. In that case, the 4 could indicate a quarter note and the 0.5 could indicate half a quarter note. That's confusing and it doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's out. The other option is to use 2 on the top to indicate 2 beats in the measure, and then have 8 plus 8 plus 8 on the bottom. But again, that also wouldn't make a lot of sense, and it's too complex, it's too complicated for the performer. Another option could be a 2 on top and then a 4 to represent the quarter note plus 8 to represent the eighth note. So that represents the beat as 1.5 beats. But again, this is kind of ridiculous. Since there's no simple answer for classifying compound meters, theorists essentially decided, okay, we just understand that in 6/8 time, the eighth note typically doesn't get the beat. And then you can apply this logic to all the other compound time signatures. They are just interpreted differently than what the time signature could suggest. Now, you could still think of a 6/8 time signature as having 6 beats in the measure, and the eighth note is going to be worth a single beat. The problem comes in if you're a conductor. If you're a conductor, you're not going to want to conduct 6/8 time in 6 beats, because generally 6/8 time moves very fast. So in order to efficiently conduct that time signature, you'd have to conduct it in 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's sort of an explanation for why compound time signatures are so weird. One other thing though, there's also a problem of 3/8 time. 3/8 time is often incorrectly identified as a compound time signature because of the 8 on the bottom. However, 3 divided by 3 is 1, and a time signature needs to have at least 2 beats in a measure for it to be considered compound. If you think about that, 3 divided by 1 is 1. There is no single meter. It's either duple, triple, quadruple, or the time signature is complex. So since you can't have just a single beat in the measure, even though a conductor may conduct a piece in 1, this means that the 3/8 time signature has to be classified as a simple triple time signature. So if you just remember that 3/8 time, if you remember that rule for classifying time signatures, that if there's a 2, 3, or 4 on the top, it's simple, then you don't even need to worry about 3/8 time. But I don't want you to get confused, and I want you to understand that 3/8 time is a simple time signature. And the reason for that is because if you classify it as compound, you only have 1 beat in the measure, and our meters for simple and compound need to consist of 2, 3, or 4, or duple, triple, or quadruple. Otherwise, it's complex. So if you need additional information on this, please read the textbook for this chapter, because that will give you additional information you can kind of go over.